Life as a Black American post-emancipation. Essential question: how had the African American community progressed after the Reconstruction era and past the 1920s? African American communities faced methods like sharecropping, discrimination toward voting and housing rights, and combating society's attitude toward them as inferior due to the color of their skin. Despite emancipation in the late 1860s, African American communities continued to face marginalization and systematic racism in business and government throughout the Reconstruction era and well beyond the 1920s. Although declared by the government as free, African Americans were not recognized as equal across the U.S., thus continuing to face discriminatory business practices like sharecropping aimed at suppressing their community. One example was Circle Number 15, passed by President Johnson in place of the Special Order Number 15. 400,000 of confiscated land that was originally promised to go to former enslaved families was instead redistributed back to the white Southern Confederates. The freed people, who were once promised land, were left homeless and forced to adopt sharecropping as a means to survive. This new method of farming had further marginalized the Black community as they were unable to grow enough to pay back the lenders. As historian Leon F. Litwick points out, recognizing that former slaves possessed neither land nor money for rent or supplies, planters exploited their poverty to exact Black labor and to control Black lives. In the Progressive era, the women's suffrage campaigning showed to be another example of marginalization of Black women. As Stapes pointed out, the most blatant example of accommodationism came in 1913, when organizers of a huge suffragist parade in Washington demanded that Black participants march in an all-Black assembly at the back of the parade, instead of with their state delegations. The New Deal, efforts in stabilizing the work class, offered hope as Roosevelt passed the National Industrial Recovery Act in 1933. However, Bruce Bartlett explained that programs passed by the government during the New Deal often systematically suppressed the Black community from gaining work during the Depression era. He states, "Unfortunately for Black workers, it quickly became clear that minimum wage rates established by the NRA tended to disadvantage them relative to whites." As historian Philip Bonner explains, it rapidly became clear that the code mechanism under the NRA was valueless for Black workers. It merely legalized for all American industry the pattern of racial discrimination that had long been the practice of Southern employers. As the textbook noted, by allowing businesses to limit production and set prices, critics argue, the NRA made consumer goods more expensive, and higher wages mandated by the NRA discouraged employers from hiring new workers. Black unemployment rates skyrocketed as businesses refused to hire. Additionally, housing programs placed under the New Deal further established racial disparity amongst African Americans and whites, and promoted housing segregations and ghettos. The Federal Housing Administration and Veterans Administration were vastly unavailable to minorities. Due to the FHA and the VA's adoption of an appraisal system, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, neighborhoods consisting of Black and Latino communities were deemed undesirable neighborhoods, thus not seen valuable and rarely approved for government-guaranteed mortgage loans like in the suburbs. Conclusion: African Americans endured a long battle against discrimination well after emancipation in 1864. The African American communities continued to be treated unequally by the government and surrounding society, trapped in the system of sharecropping. Though being declared free by the government, the evolution of the African American communities was slow to prosper as they faced hardships including sharecropping, as well as unequal employment and housing opportunities stemming from the governmental policies during the New Deal decades and after emancipation.